someplace we stopped. Okay, so we stopped with so the nightingale flew over to the rose tree that was growing round the sundial. Right? Let's see.
As white as the foam of the sea, and whiter than the snow upon the mountain. I sing you my sweetest song. So the nightingale flew over to the rose tree that was growing round the old sundial.
He was asked to go to the rose tree
Give me
that
a red
was
rose, she cried, and
growing
I will
round the
sing you my
sundial.
sweetest song. But the tree shook its head. My roses are yellow, it answered, as yellow as the hair of the mermaiden who sits upon an amber throne, and yellower than the daffodil that blooms in the meadow before the mower comes with his scythe. But go to my brother who grows beneath the student's window. Perhaps he will give you what you want.
Okay. So I wanted to underline the line which says, as yellow as the hair of the mermaidian who sits upon an amber throne. Okay, it presents now this rose tree, the second rose tree the nightingale goes to is a yellow rose tree. Okay, so the first one was a white rose tree, second is a yellow rose tree. The nightingale didn't know. So the rose tree which was near the rose tree which was growing around the sundial was a remember with the word sun, right? It's a yellow rose tree. Okay, and then the nightingale says, okay, give me a red rose, I'm going to sing you the sweetest song. But the rose tree says, my roses are yellow, and yellow as the hair of the mermaidian. So the mermaid, right? Mermaids have golden hair. They're beautiful. They're supposed to kind of capture the hearts of the sailors during the past, and they never return. Okay, so that is a mythical illusion. So they sit on the amber throne, right, in the seas, far off seas, and they sing in such a lovely manner that the sailors who go out to the far off seas get lost. Those were the mythical stories which comes out. Okay, and so the rose tree says, I am my roses are yellow, so yellow, they're yellow than the daffodils that bloom in the meadow, right? So they're yellow. You have you seen yellow daffodils, right? So we will move on to pictures of all of these later, right? So yellower than the daffodils. And then before the mower comes with his scythe, you know what the scythe is. I have showed you pictures of the scythe, right? We came across the word scythe in the poem Farewell to Barnstaff Country. Okay, so then the rose tree says again, go to my brother who grows beneath the student's window. So there is another rose tree which is beneath the student's window. So the moment the student opens the window, the student would have seen this rose tree. So there is a rose tree even though the student is crying. Okay, and then this rose tree says, go there and you will get what you want.
So the nightingale flew over to the rose tree that was growing beneath the student's window. Give me a red rose, she cried, and I will sing you my sweetest song. But the tree shook its head. My roses are red, it answered, as red as the feet of the dove, and redder than the great fans of coral that wave and wave in the ocean cavern. But the winter has chilled my veins, and the frost has nipped my buds, and the storm has broken my branches, and I shall have no roses at all this year. One red rose is all I want, cried the nightingale. Only one red rose. Is there no way by which I can get it? There is a way, answered the tree, but it is so terrible that I dare not tell it to you.
Okay, so this part which says now the nightingale goes to the red rose tree, right, and requests for a red rose. Underline again the red rose tree. What the red rose tree says, underline as red as the feet of a dove. So these are all similes, comparisons, right? So the rose tree says, my roses are red, so red. They're red as the feet of the dove. The dove's feet are red. And the rose tree goes even further, telling redder than the great fans of coral, right? Coral is a sort of a shell, right? You get corals, you have seen corals, lovely, lovely corals you get in the sea, right? So corals that wave and wave in the ocean cavern, right? And wind, but there is a but. Now there is again another issue which the rose tree presents. The Nightingale has finally found a solution, but still the solution is not actually complete. Okay, but the winter has chilled my veins. So thereby the rose tree is like speaking as if it has life, right? You have veins in your body where the blood flows, and that's how you live, right? So the rose tree says, my veins are chilled now. The frost has nipped my buds, right? Because this is winter season, the frost, right? The wintry frost has nipped the buds. So the teeny weeny flowers which are coming had been taken out by frost. So therefore it's chilled and the veins are chilled. Therefore no flowers. And further, the rose tree says, the storm has broken my branches. Because it's stormy, the branches are broken. So therefore, very unhappily, the rose tree says that I will not be able to give any roses this year. Okay, so the nightingale is really upset at this situation and says, one red rose is all I want. I don't want a lot. I just want one red rose. Only one red rose. And then the nightingale says, is there no way by which I can get it? Because the nightingale wants a red rose. Then the rose tree says, yes, there's a way. But it is so terrible, I dare not tell you. Okay, so I want you to underline, is there no way by which I can get it? Underline that which says, is there no way by which I can get it? Mark it for a context. Underline that and mark it for a context. Okay, you will get the questions later. And the rose tree says there is a way, but I don't want to tell it. So that itself gives a sort of a foreshadowing that it's going to be something terrible. Okay, to obtain the rose, there something terrible is going to happen.
"Tell it to me," said the nightingale. "I am not afraid." "If you want a red rose," said the tree, "you must build it out of music by moonlight, and stain it with your own
Underline
heart's
that
blood.
line.
You must sing to me with your breast against a thorn. All night long you must sing to me, and the thorn must pierce your heart, and your life-blood must flow into my veins and become mine."
Now, isn't that terrible? This is sort of brutal, isn't it? Right? First, the nightingale says, tell it to me, tell it to me. I'm not afraid. I want to find out, even though it's terrible. Now, the nightingale is a teeny weeny bird. You saw the picture, right? So the nightingale says, I'm not afraid. You tell it to me. Then the rose tree continues. If you want a red rose, what you have to do is you must build it out of music by moonlight, right? So nightingales sing in the night usually. They start in the evening time. So the nightingale, the rose tree says, you must build the rose. You have to build the rose by moonlight, right? By singing in the moonlight, and stain it with your own heart's blood. Stain it. Staining is to give color, right? So by singing, you have to stain it, give the color to the rose with your own heart's blood. So the nightingale's heart's blood has to come to the rose to get the color. Isn't that a terrible thing? I want you to underline that entire line which says you must build it out of music by moonlight and stain it with your own heart's blood. Underline that, and we will again mark that also as a context, right? The questions will come later, you know. You just have to underline for the moment. Right? And further, we are told how brutal it is that the nightingale's breast has to be pressed against the thorn of the rose tree. Okay, those who were there at the technique workshop, I think y'all saw, y'all heard, I told you about the qualities of the rose, right? You get a positive as well as a negative when you metaphorically compare. So in the same way, the rose tree is beautiful. To get that beauty, now the nightingale has to press its breast against the thorn so that heart, the thorn would reach the heart of the nightingale and the blood would flow into the rose tree. And it has to be done not for an hour or two or just for a short time. It has to be done all night long. So you get a lot of techniques here. You get the comparison, you get the metaphor, you get the brutality, you get all night long kind of hyperbole. It's like the entire night the nightingale will have to go on singing. Okay, and also this is the solution given. So this is a very, very difficult solution. Okay, because the flower says your lifeblood must flow into mine and it has to become mine. Right? Let's move on. I think you understood that.
Death is a great price to pay for a red rose, cried the nightingale, and life is very dear to all. It is pleasant to sit in the green wood, and to watch the sun in his chariot of gold, and the moon in her chariot of purple. Sweet is the scent of the hawthorn, and sweet are the bluebells that hide in the valley, and the heather that flows on the hill. Yet love is better than life, and what is the heart of a bird compared to the heart of a man?
Right. This is a beautiful paragraph, right? The nightingale says, death is a great price to pay for a red rose. The nightingale understood the gravity of the situation, right? So there is a metaphor there. Okay, death is a great price to pay for a red rose. Underline that. And then the nightingale goes on to tell, life is very dear to all. Everyone loves life. And the nightingale goes on, it's very pleasant and it's very nice to sit outside in the green wood and then watch the sun, right? The sun in his chariot of gold. The sun has been personified there. You can underline that and mark it as personification. Moon in her chariot of pearl. Again, the moon has been personified. Sweet is the scent of the hawthorn. Hawthorn are flowers, right? Now, the next assignment is that I'm not going to show you the pictures. All what we saw today, the pictures. Now, from the first one, earlier I told you the picture of, what was it? When we read the sundial, you all sent the picture, right? We lost the place. Right? So,
In the ocean cavern. But the winter has chilled my veins. All night long you must sing to me, and the thorn must pierce your heart. My roses are white, it answered. But the oak tree understood and felt sad. Though he is mighty, return. Be happy, cried the nightingale. Be
okay, hold
happy.
on. I think I have to find the place a little bit more. We have to move back. But I was trying to tell you the pictures. You have to find the pictures for these and send it to me, right? So you have to get pictures of hawthorns, you have to get pictures of bluebells, you have to name it and send it as a project. Okay, so that is before next Tuesday. Before the next class, you have to send pictures. WhatsApp them. Okay, WhatsApp them onto the group itself. That's better. With your, you don't have to mention your name. Just when you want WhatsApp, I know that it's you because your name is saved. Okay, WhatsApp to the group itself. So that when one person does it, the others will not have to. Only about 2 can send in the same. So try to do it first. So you have to send hawthorns, bluebells, heather, right? And all of these. Okay, sundial you have already sent, so you don't have to send the sundial. So that is supposed to be like an activity where you're going to find all these things. The mermaid, you're going to get a picture of the mermaid. Okay, corals, dove. Okay, so all these unusual words you came across, you have to send the pictures, right? That is your next assignment, so that you do research on these. Okay, and now very sadly let me move on to the place. right? The nightingale says it's, oh, electricity went off, but we will continue. Okay, so death is a great price to pay for a red rose. So now bluebells also, right? So, but the nightingale decides that love is better than life. And what is the heart of a bird compared to the heart of a man? I want you to underline from yet love is better than life until the heart of a man. Mark it for a context question. Again, question. Okay, right? So there we see that the nightingale has extremely beautiful qualities, because the nightingale is willing to sacrifice her life. Now she says that yet, okay, so even though it's difficult, death is a great prize, the nightingale feels that love is better than life. Okay, love is better than life. To whom is this told? The nightingale is thinking, and then the nightingale most probably tells this to the red rose tree. Okay, love is better than life. And the heart of a bird. So he says, what is the heart of a bird compared to the heart of a man? So he says, the heart of a man is much valuable, the heart of a bird. Okay, did you understand that? Okay, so let's move on.
So she spread her brown wings for flight and soared into the air. She swept over the garden like a shadow, and like a shadow she sailed through the grove. The young student was still lying on the grass where she had left him, and the tears were not yet dry in his beautiful eyes.
Okay, so there you understood, like a shadow, and like a shadow, she sailed through the grove. Okay, so underline that, that is a repetition. How the student flew, how the nightingale flew. Okay, nightingale's flight, the movement, like a shadow, and like a shadow, the nightingale flew. Right? And then until all this is done, while the nightingale had been flying, trying to find a solution, what had the student been doing? The student was lying on the grass and was still crying because the tears are not yet dry in his eyes, it seems. Okay, electricity came back finally. Okay, so the student has been continuously sitting there and not at all practically doing or trying to find a solution to his problem. It was a nightingale who actually tried to find the solution. Okay.
Be happy, cried the nightingale.
Now the nightingale
Be
is talking
happy.
to the
You
student.
shall have your red rose.
But the student doesn't
I will build it out of
understand.
music by moonlight, and stain it with my own heart's blood. All that I ask of you in return is that you will be a true lover. For love is wiser than philosophy, though she is wise, and mightier than power, though he is mighty. Flame-coloured are his wings, and coloured like flame is his body. His lips are sweet as honey, and his breath is like frankincense. The student looked up from the grass and listened, but he could not understand what the nightingale was saying to him, for he only knew the things that are written down in books.
So the earlier paragraph, underline all that I ask of you in return until frankincense. So you have to get pictures of frankincense. You have to get, pictures of frankincense only, right? So the nightingale told the student, don't worry, I'm going to get you the rose. Okay, but she tells, all I ask, she doesn't give a condition telling, but this is what you have to do. But the nightingale just says, all I ask from you, right? I'm going to do a big sacrifice for you. What I want from you is to become a good lover, right? You will be a true lover, right? So true love is important because Nightingale symbolizes true love. That is an important feature that you have to remember, because that paragraph, what is told there and what I wanted to underline, where the Nightingale says, be a true lover, for love is wiser than philosophy, right? Love surpasses all the powers of the world, because she goes on to tell that love is wiser than philosophy. Philosophy is supposed to be a wise subject. So love is wiser than philosophy. And she is wise and mightier than power. So there the she is philosophy. Okay. And he is, though he is mighty, he, the second he, is a reference to power, right? Flame colored are his wings. Okay, so flame colored are his wings. You can take it as if the wings of power. Okay, and colored like flame is his body. His lips are sweet as honey, and his breath is like frankincense. No, flame colored are his wings. This is a reference to love, right? Love is wiser than philosophy. So all these reference, the flame, colored like flame is his body, sweet, lips are sweet as honey, breath is like frankincense. All those are reference to love. Okay, so many personifications in there. And then the student looked up. The student saw the nightingale telling something, singing, but the student didn't understand, right? He couldn't understand, which is told, right? So it brings out the idea that the student could not appreciate nature, couldn't be the beauty in nature, the beauty of nature. He was wise. He knew about, not wise, he had a theoretical knowledge. He knew what was there in the books, but he could not appreciate nature. Underline again, for he only knew the things that are written down in books. Okay, let's continue reading.
But the oak tree understood and felt sad, for he was very fond of the little nightingale, who had built her nest in his branches. "Sing me one last song," he whispered. "I shall feel very lonely when you are gone."
Okay, the oak tree, the nightingale would have sat on the oak tree's branch and told all these things to the student. So the student didn't understand, but nature understood. The oak tree understood. And the oak tree knew the sacrifice the nightingale was willing to. Nightingale's home was in the oak tree. Okay, so the oak tree whispered, the oak tree says, hey, sing me your last song, because I'm going to feel very lonely when you're gone. Because the oak tree knew that once the nightingale does that, the nightingale would be no more. The nightingale would die. Okay, so the nightingale was willing to sacrifice her life just to get a rose for the student. Okay, so it's very ironical that the student did not understand about it, isn't it?
So the nightingale sang to the oak tree, and her voice was like water bubbling from a silver jar. When she had finished her song, the student got up and pulled a notebook and a lead pencil out of his pocket. "She has form," he said to himself, as he walked away through the grove.
Okay, I'll pause there. Now, the nightingale sang, right? Sang the last song. So the oak tree, so the nightingale sang to the oak tree. Her voice was like water bubbling from a silver jar. I want you to underline. There is a simile, and water bubbling from a silver jar also brings in onomatopoeia, right? Very beautiful. A beautiful sound came out. It was so beautiful. Okay, so when she had finished the song, the student heard the song, got up, pulled a notebook from his pocket and a pencil, and started to write something. So what is he writing? He doesn't appreciate music. He's just writing what the structure of what he heard. Okay, because he goes on to say she has form, right? And he's walking. She said to him as he walked away through the grove. He just wrote something. She has form, and went away. Okay, you don't see appreciation coming from him.
That cannot be denied to her. But has she got feeling? I am afraid not. In fact, she is like most artists. She is all style without any sincerity. She would not sacrifice herself for others. She thinks merely of music, and everybody knows that the arts are selfish. Still, it must be admitted that she has some beautiful notes in her voice. What a pity it is that they do not mean anything or do any practical good. And he went into his room and lay down on his little pallet bed and began to think of his love. And after a time he fell asleep.
Okay, so underline, but has she got feeling? There is a question mark there, right? Almost it's a rhetorical question, right? No, you can't take it as a rhetorical question because she says, but has she got feeling? I'm afraid not. He himself answers the question, right? So this is very ironical because the nightingale did have feelings. The nightingale is the one who felt so much, so sad about the student's situation and wanted to help him out. But very ironically, the student doesn't know that. Okay, the student didn't know it, and the student criticizes in a cynical manner, analyzes or looks at the nightingale. He is actually voicing his opinion. If he was in the same situation, what he would do? He would not sacrifice himself. So already he had decided most probably not to sacrifice himself for the lady love, right? For this professor's daughter, because he cried, yes, but he didn't do anything. And the student continues to say that she would not sacrifice herself for others. Underline that again, because that is also important. That is ironical because that is exactly what happens, even though the student says that she would not do it. Okay, and again there is a line I want you to underline. What a pity it is that they do not mean anything or do any practical good, right? Talking about her music. Now that is again ironical because the student says that the music, her singing, would not do a practical good, because it's wrong. Later on, it is that music that builds the song for the boy, for the student. Okay, so that entire paragraph, I wanted to mark it and keep it as a, think of it as a maybe like 2 or 3 lines might come from there for a context. It's important because this is a cynical portrayal by the student. He's voicing his opinion. How selfish he is seen by what he utters. Okay, right? And then after telling all that, he goes to his room. Right now, while he's going to his room, also he would have seen the red rose tree because it's just in front of his window, but he had not noticed it. He goes to his room and he sleeps on his little pallet bed. It's a small bed, and he sleeps there. Okay, and while he's sleeping, he thinks about the girl, but he has done anything at all to obtain the love.
And when the moon shone in the heavens, the nightingale flew to the rose tree, and set her breast against the thorn. All night long she sang with her breast against the thorn, and the cold crystal moon leaned down and listened. All night long she sang, and the thorn went deeper and deeper into her breast, and her life-blood ebbed away from her.
Okay, so when the moon shone in the heaven, that is like late in the night, because that was what the nightingale was supposed to do, build the rose with music in the moonlight all night long, right? So when the moon came, the nightingale had flown to the rose tree and had set the breast against the the thorn, and started singing. Okay, underline that first line. And when the moon shone until thorn. First sentence, underline the first sentence, mark it for a context. Look at the repetition, all night long. And again, all night long she sang, all night long she sang, all night long she sang. The repetition is emphasizing that the nightingale's action, the action of sacrificing herself, right? The moon leaned down and listened. Even the moon leaned down and listened, it seems. Moon is also personified again because the moon also listened because the music was so beautiful. And so beautiful that as the thorn went deeper and deeper into her breast, her lifeblood ebbed away from her. Ebbed is it moved away from her. It moved away from her into the rose tree. Okay, so she's like giving the her life to the rose tree.
Her lifeblood ebbed away from her. She sang first of the birth of love in the heart of a boy and a girl, and on the topmost spray of the rose tree there blossomed a marvellous rose, petal following petal, as song followed song. Pale was it at first, as the mist that hangs over the river, pale as the feet of the morning, and silver as the wings of the dawn. As the shadow of a rose in a mirror of silver, as the shadow of a rose in a water pool, so was the rose that blossomed on the topmost spray of the tree.
Okay, so now what was she singing? Now she was singing continuously. So in her song, the content of the song was the first few notes were about the birth of love in the heart of a boy and a girl. So the starting point of love. So she's singing, right, about love, because she is a bird of love, right? She's a symbol of love. So she's singing about the start of the innocent love. And then the topmost spray of the rose tree, there blossomed a marvelous rose. Okay, so when she was singing, the rose is blooming now. Okay, it's being made. Okay, and petal following petal. So petal by petal, the rose began to form, right? And song as the petal as the songs came, petal by petal, the rose also began. Pale was it at first, as the mist that hangs over the river. Comparison. First, the rose was pale. It didn't have color. It was very pale. Pale as the feet of the morning and silver as the wings of the dawn. So it is a color which is silvery, right? Whitish, silvery. You cannot see it. So it's just forming, right? It's still at the forming, starting process. As the shadow of a rose in a mirror of silver. So you can't see a red rose, because this is the starting point, the rose's creation, starting of the rose, okay? And the shadow of a rose in a water pool. So you see a very shadowy version of a rose, because the rose is being created. So this is the creation of the rose, the process of the creation, which is mentioned in this paragraph, which you have to remember. This is an extended simile, because you see the continuation of the simile of the rose, how the rose looked like. Okay, the rose was a marvelous rose. It formed petal by petal. It was pale, right? It was pale as the feet of the morning. It was pale, or it was silver as the wings of the dawn. So do you see the comparison? Shadow, as the shadow of a rose in a mirror of silver, as the shadow of a rose in a water pool. So all those are similes for the rose. So was the rose that blossomed in the topmost spray of the rose tree. So this was the look of the rose which came. Okay, so let's read the next paragraph also.
But the tree cried to the nightingale to press closer against the thorn. "Press closer, little nightingale," cried the tree, "or the day will come before the rose is finished." So the nightingale pressed closer against the thorn, and louder grew her song, for she sang of the birth of passion in the soul of a man and a maid.
Right. So now she was singing and singing. So now the difficult process of creating of the rose has come. The rose is almost getting finished now, but no color still. It's still silver, right? So the rose tree is crying, press closer, because there is more. The rose has to be finished. Okay, the day will come before the rose is finished. If you don't press closer, the day will come, morning will come. Now all night long she had been singing, and the rose, the structuring of the rose has finished, but the color has not yet come, right? So when the tree shouted, press closer, the little nightingale pressed closer against the thorn, right? When she was getting closer to the thorn, the pain would have made her cry out loud. Okay, so she was singing louder than before. The song became louder and louder. And then in her song, she sang of the birth of passion in the soul of a man and maid, right? So earlier she sang about the starting of love, and then she's developing it into a more stronger version of love. Okay, so she's singing this because she's now almost coming to the ending of her life as well. She is also in pain. Okay, so while she's in pain, she's still singing because she needs to complete the red rose. Okay, so that is, I hope you understood up to that point. And I'm going to stop there, and I will see you next week, next Tuesday, same time. I want you to complete the activity which I told you. Okay, so complete the activity and send it to the WhatsApp itself, to the group. Okay, send it via WhatsApp to the group itself. Send in the pictures up to this point you have found. If you want to read on your own, read up further and find the other pictures as well and send it to the WhatsApp. Okay, then I'll see you again next Tuesday. God bless you. Stay safe. Be ready for some questions on the Nightingale and the Rose when we start next week, and we are going to finish the short story next week. Okay, God bless you and take care.